Okay, I think we're on. So hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our meeting this relatively late Thursday evening. My name is Mufado. I'm the president of the SAS Club, and today we have Professor Anderson. So I'll go ahead and read a little bit about Professor Anderson, and then he'll get on and do his presentation, and we will have time for questions at the end. But Professor Michael Anderson, who's Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Air Force, retired. He's been teaching statistics and computer science in South Texas for over 40 years at St. Mary's University, Texas Lutheran, UT Austin, and now UTSA. Teaching is his second good career. He began while he was still on active duty in the Air Force. He has taught nearly every undergraduate course in statistics and data science, and is currently developing a new undergraduate course dedicated to data science. He's currently doing research in multivariate analysis in cooperation with UTSA's own Dr. Hanurada. Is that how you say that, Roy?
Roy.
And he's the current vice president of the San Antonio chapter of the American Statistical Association and faculty advisor of our wonderful club, SAS Club, or UTSA student chapter of the ASA. And his talk today will be on something non-statistical, presentation for the visually impaired, some lessons learned from developing online courses during the recent epidemic. So listen on, we will have time for questions at the end, but if you do have a burning question, feel free to drop it in the chat if you feel like you're gonna forget it. But I'll hand it over to you, Professor Anderson.
Okay, so before I get started, a quick plug for ASA membership. By all means, kick in the $2 for the student chapter. That $2 goes a long ways. And think seriously about getting a student rate, which I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but I think you can get a special student rate to join the full ASA chapter downtown. ASA membership, you get some good free magazines, you get access to job placement services. Lots of the journals are available online, but online for members, not for everybody. You can sign up for lots and lots of good news feeds. So you can find out about regional conferences, short workshops, lots of free presentations. There's the online discussions. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the profession that you really can't tap into until you get a professional membership. So I would encourage all the club members to go ahead and take a look at that stuff. Nobody's gonna keep you from graduating if you don't belong, certainly. But I think you'll find that that's a useful tool and good value for your money. Good value for your money. So that's my plug for the ASA. And now I want to make a presentation, and I'm going to say something about this presentation. As the introduction said, this is something non-statistical. All right, it's non-statistical only in the sense that we don't teach it on our courses. We don't explicitly evaluate you on it, but it's going to be a fact of life in almost any work you do after graduation, and I think the presentation will kind of show you why. All right, and so let me pop up the screen. I know you're all tired of looking at me, okay, especially if you take a class from me already, and we'll get started. Okay, and so what I'm going to talk about is presentation for the visually impaired. Okay, and the reason I'm talking about this will become apparent as we go through the talk. But I want to start with some recent history. Most of us have heard of Senator Bob Dole. He unsuccessfully ran for president a few years back, but Senator Dole's lasting contribution was very, very different from what you heard about him most of the time and radio, TV, or on the web. Okay. So Bob Dole was a junior officer in the Army in World War II, and he was permanently injured in combat, disabling his right arm. And so he had all kinds of little strategies to minimize that when he was in public. But if you watched closely, he was unable to use his right arm. But because of that disability, he became very, very aware of the handicaps and the barriers put up for people who are disabled. Okay. And in fact, his opening speech to Congress was advocating consideration for the disabled. So during all of his tenure in Congress, he was working on behalf of the disabled, and it kind of culminated in the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Now, we're all at least marginally aware of the ADA, wheelchair ramps and extra guardrails and elevator access to upper stories, and students get certain accommodations for test times and that kind of stuff. All right. So we know it's out there. We know it's out there. Okay. The problem is that we have legislation that mandates that we make accommodations, but the general public is really unaware of all the situations where accommodations are needed. Okay, there's all kinds of things that we do unconsciously that are biased towards people with full abilities. Okay, and we don't think about them. They just never occur to us. All right, and lots of times they don't occur to anybody until they acquire some kind of disability. Okay, and so what that means is that yeah, we've made some really obvious and in some ways superficial, but in some ways very, very significant progress in making accommodations. But we're not done. We're not done because there's stuff we just haven't thought of yet. Okay. And the one thing that was brought home to me a couple of years ago is accommodations for people with visual impairments. So people with no vision, people with poor vision, okay, people, there's all kinds of things. People that are dyslexic readers. Okay, there's a whole raft of these things. Okay, and so I'm gonna show you some of the barriers that happen in visual communication. Now, why am I showing you this? It's because when you do an analysis and you present the results, you can very easily, unconsciously throw up some of these barriers. Okay, and so you might have what you think is the perfect presentation, and then for a person that has a visual handicap, there's something that just doesn't work for them. All right, and so here's my favorite, because it's one of my visual handicaps: color blindness. Okay, and so this is an example of an Ishihara color blindness test. And if you have perfect color vision, all 6 of those circles have a number in them. Okay, if you don't have perfect color vision, you can't see all the numbers. I can see 3 of them. Okay, but others of you can see more. Some of you may not be able to see as many. All right, and so that's a pretty obvious one that most people, especially people doing statistical graphics, overlook. Okay, fonts. Okay, how many people know about the small print? How many people have looked at the small print on their credit card statement? Okay, that is not friendly. And so here's some things that people do with fonts that are just deadly. It's too small. Okay, I mean, I have documents that come in the mail that have financial import to me. I have to use a magnifying glass to read them. All right, it's just ridiculous. Poor contrast, especially on a computer screen. Contrast is very, very difficult to manage, and so that that can be a problem. And then just using a stupid font. Okay, this one reads, "Are you kidding?" All right, but you know, if you don't have real acute vision, that would be almost impossible to read. Okay, and then there's images. Okay, some people just do not see images well. Okay, and so you might have a killer picture and it turns out looking like this to them, totally out of focus. Okay, completely blurred. And so those are obvious visual barriers. Okay, and notice we're not even talking about readability or anything. We're just talking about, crap, I can't see this stuff. All right, now when we get into document content, we're going to talk about some document barriers. And these are things that you may not even know they're happening. Okay, so you can imagine this person who's got low visual ability and he's got to work on the web. Maybe he's taking a class here at UTSA or something. Okay, and so he has some technology to help him, usually a thing called a document reader. And so that document reader may actually read the text of the document and then, you know, basically speak it to him, read it to him aloud. And the problem is you can write what you think is a perfectly well organized, intelligible document, good grammar, good spelling, the whole bit. And then the document reader technology gets hung up. Okay. And it gets hung up over organizational things like tables of contents, chapter and section headers, bibliographies, indexes, tabular data, and of course, graphics. Okay. And so regular text, it reads right along. But as soon as you get to these things that break the document into chunks or make it easier to manipulate, especially for a fully capable person, if those things haven't been taken care of, the document reader technology will lock up or fail to support them. Okay, and so those are kind of the big deal, the most obvious barriers for visual presentation. So I got good news and I got bad news about doing presentation, and especially for documents. Okay, screen readers like HTML web pages. Okay, they like well-organized web pages, and then we'll talk a little bit about that. They also like Adobe PDFs. They like HTML better than PDFs, but PDFs are coming in, you know, a very close second. All right. If you want to do good HTML, Microsoft Word is the go-to tool. Okay. I'm not a big fan of Microsoft Word. I think it gives me too much help, but you know, the world doesn't care what I like. Okay. I can generate very good accessible documents with Microsoft Word. Adobe Acrobat has a nice tool called an accessibility checker. And so this is a little screenshot of a corner from Adobe Acrobat. And one of the tools, it's this little guy down here, the little Vitruvian man in the blue. You can click on that guy and that will open up this menu of accessibility checkers. You hit the button for accessibility check and it'll tell you how good your document is. Okay. It'll even let you fix some of the stuff in your document. The real problem with Adobe PDF is it'll find more bugs than it'll let you fix. So this is an emerging technology. It's relatively new stuff. It's not perfect. Okay. But it goes a long ways towards making your documents screen readable. Now, here's the bad news for scientists and engineers of all stripes. Almost all of us love to typeset technical documentation with LaTeX, all right? Because LaTeX gives us unrivaled support for doing mathematical notation, okay? And fabulous support for bibliographies. So it is the go-to tool for technical publication, especially when you want to submit to professional journals. Almost every professional journal has their own LaTeX template. And if you want to submit an article, you go get their template, You run your document through it, and it's laid out exactly. It's photocopy ready for the journal, and you can send it in. That's great. That's great for professional publication. But that same document is a total frickin' nightmare for a screen reader, because LaTeX does not do good organizational tagging. Okay, and it can't be fixed easily. Okay, they would basically have to burn down LaTeX and start over. So that's, you're in two worlds. You're in two worlds when you're doing technical publication. Okay, you can do super high quality academic level stuff with LaTeX, or you can go to use Word and Adobe and do high accessibility stuff. And so that's going to depend on your audience. Now, here's the problem for most people, especially if you're going to be working in government, or if you're going to be working for big pharma, or if you're going to be working for anybody that's got government contracts. You must be in ADA compliance. You must make all kinds of accommodations. And so if your organization is not yet doing this, it's coming. It's coming. Okay. So one of the reasons I'm telling you all this is, when you get out on the job and somebody says, we're having a problem with visual accommodations, you're the guy that's going to hold his hand and say, wait a minute, I learned about this back at UTSA, and I've got a shopping list of stuff we can go get and start getting ourselves straightened out. So let's talk about some of those accommodations. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about general accommodations, just all kinds of things that are out there laying around that you can use to start upgrading for visual accommodations. And this is my favorite. This is something I discovered by accident. Okay, the Braille Foundation, the Braille Institute, commissioned the development of what's called a hyperlegible font. Okay, and it's like super easy to read. It's super easy to read. It's called Atkinson Hyperlegible. You can go to the Braille Institute website and download it for free and install it on your Windows computer. It takes like 10 minutes. All right. And then once you've installed it, you can use that in Word, in Excel. You can configure your web browser to use it. Okay. You can use it in developing web pages, the whole bit. It's way easier to read than any of the standard fonts available on a Windows PC. A little story I have to tell about that is, my wife is like the world's best proofreader. I can hold up a document like 6 feet away from her, and she can look at it and say, you're missing a comma on that fourth line, 2 words from the end. And I'll look at it like, how did you spot that? And I don't know, it's like she's got a superpower or something. Okay. But about 6 months ago, I asked her if she would proofread one of my course syllabuses, because it's like a friggin' 14-page document, and I'm basically burnt by the time I finish typing one up. So she's a good proofreader. And she said, you didn't do that in Word, did you? And I said, yeah. And she says, man, I'm not going to be able to read that. And I said, hey, take a look at it anyway. And I had printed it in this hyperlegible. And she took one look and she says, oh my gosh, this is really easy to read. This is super easy to read. And so she went through and proofread it. And then she says, hey, can I have that font? And I said, why? And she says, because I can't read half the stuff on the web. So I installed it on her laptop. And again, it's about a 20-minute install. And it's like night and day. She can read everything. So she loves this. She loves this. She said it's super, super good. Okay. Now that's a good font, but sometimes you want to emphasize stuff on the web. And so there's 2 ways that we usually emphasize things. One is with the typeface. We use italics or bold. All right. But the other is with color. All right. And so you think, wow, if I make it bright red or something, it's really going to pop. Everybody's going to be able to see this. Well, yeah, yes and no. If you're visually impaired, you may have problems with contrast. Okay, and so that bright color may not pop for you. How do you get colors that pop? There's an online checker called WebAIM, and you go to WebAIM and you say, let's try the font, let's try the colors, and you put it in there. Okay, so you can set the color and the background, and you got to get a contrast ratio, and you got to have a contrast ratio of at least 4.5. Okay, and so you could play around with colors and fonts, and then get the highlights that you want. All right, that will be accessible. And when you run these through some of the more sophisticated checkers, they'll pass every time, so they're really good. Finally, with graphics, okay, it's really it's super easy now to draw good computer graphics. Okay, there's all kinds of plotting packages that do wonderful statistical graphics. The problem is you might do a wonderful statistical graphic and a colorblind person can't distinguish the different groupings or lines. So Come to the Rescue is an application developed mainly for cartography, but it's also good for just picking general palettes. It's called Color Brewer. All right. There's a site. Guess what? It's called Color Brewer. All right. And so you can go out to the Color Brewer site and you can pick color schemes. They will let you narrow it down to those that are good for colorblind people. All right. As an extra bonus, the ability to select colorblind safe palettes from the Color Brewer universe is built into a package for R. So you can load that package and you can get those palettes without you having to code it up by hand. So that's just super handy. And these are general things that you can use for all kinds of applications. Okay, drill down a little bit more. Let's talk about what goes on in HTML. Okay, so sometimes you got to go caveman on web pages, and you have to actually get inside the web page and thrash around with the hypertext markup language. All right, for screen readers, okay, there are heading elements, and the heading elements are actually a hierarchy. So top level is H1, where one level's down is H2, and so on. All right, for screen readers, you're supposed to start at the top and work your way down, and don't skip levels just because you want a font to be larger or smaller. Okay, so that's pretty much the rule on setting up for screen readers. The good news is people that are using R Markdown, when you set up headers, the number of hashtags at the beginning of a header line is the header level. So one tag is a H1, two tags is an H2, and so on. And so that makes it automatic for you. You don't have to set it up. You don't have to think about it. Okay. The other thing is tables. Tabular stuff is always a chore. All right. And so a good screen reader is looking for a couple of things in a table. One is captioning. And so there's a special caption element that's available for tables. And the other is headers. Okay. And so a header looks just like any other line in a table, except it's got a special mark called T head and then table head rows, table head items, TH. The problem is that a lot of the tools that generate HTML, including Microsoft Word, do not support these headers. Okay, and so that means you might have to do some hand tooling. But that's a work in progress. That'll happen, maybe before you all graduate. The last thing, and this one will bite you all the time, is images. Okay, images. I mean, it's a picture. What the hell can I do with a picture? Well, there's a couple of things you could do with a picture to help out both the visually impaired and the fully able reader. And those are optional things called a title and the alt. So the alt is for a person that can't see the image or can't understand the image. Okay. And so that shows up in a screen reader. Now the title, the title will generate a little pop-up like a tooltip. All right. And so you might want to have some enrichment material that goes along with an image. And if you put that title in there, then you just put the cursor on the image and you'll get that extra information. So this is a way to enrich a web presentation without cluttering the screen. So that's pretty nice. Now, all those things I've talked about, if you're working on a web page and you say, well, I think I did all my stuff, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I meet the standards. There's an online web server called the Markup validation service. And so this is a web page freely available to everyone. And what it'll do is it'll let you upload your web page and it'll run it through a checker and it'll give you back a checklist. It'll give you back a checklist. Okay. And so that's like super handy. It's very fast and it's free. Okay. We love free. Okay. So those are kind of the basic tools. Now, some of you may have noticed this, but pretty much this is something that's going on the down low on campus. So, happening in the background with not too much fanfare. But UTSA's got a couple of programs that are especially geared towards digital accessibility. Okay, the first one started 2 years ago when we did the lockdown. Okay, so we had the big lockdown in March of 2020, right after spring break. We had a crash program to convert all our sites to online teaching only, and right then, immediately when they did that, they realized that most of our faculty had no idea how to structure a course for online. Okay, we were clueless. So they got in touch with this nonprofit organization called Quality Matters, and Quality Matters has a structure, a rubric, training courses, the whole bit for whipping your courses into shape for online. We were encouraged to take this training, and UTSA is in some ways a very nice employer because the way they encouraged us was offering us money. And so being relatively greedy, I said, sure, I'll take the money, not realizing that it meant doing another 30 to 40 hours of work a week during the workshop, but I did it anyway. And so I learned how to build online courses. The drawback was 2 years ago, the tools that I've already shown you weren't out there, or they weren't known. They weren't widely published. And so most of what we did back then, okay, and I talk about 2 years ago as being way back then, all right, we did by hand. We did it by trial and error, okay? And so we would put up a lesson, and then some person that was an expert on this stuff would go through and check it by hand. All right. And so you'd put something up and they'd check it, and 2 or 3 days later, you'd get a report back that said, hey, you need to fix this. And so that was a bit of a chore. All right. Fast forward 1 year. So last summer 2021, Academic Innovation came up with this thing called the Ally Pilot Program. And they introduced tools for checking Blackboard sites. Okay. And so all kinds of good automated tools. So it would spot all the problems with bad fonts, problem with bad headings, problems with no alt explanation for images, a variety of other things. And it's a tool that can be plugged into any Blackboard website. I have it on almost all of mine right now. Here's a score from the other day. I wasn't perfect. Okay. When I took the course, I managed to get up in the high 90s, but this course is not quite there. And the reason is, of all things, Adobe. Okay. Which Adobe? Adobe for LaTeX documents. Okay. So I generated some documents in LaTeX, and they don't play well. They don't play well. So I have to go through the process of converting those to something a little bit better. But the long-term goal is that everybody will use these checkers, and all of our sites will be up in the 90% range for digital accessibility. We ain't there yet. These are still, I think they're on their third wave of pilot programs. There's no cutover date to require it on all UTSA websites, but a lot of people in the business school have been participating in this, and so we have some pretty good compliance on these. So a checklist, and this is the big deal. This is the big deal you should take to heart in terms of skills that you want to have to augment your basic statistical toolkit. Okay, you should learn about the Adobe Accessibility Checker. It's easy. If you generate a PDF document, and you can do that very easily, type a Word document, do a save to PDF, pop up Adobe, hit the checker. Okay, and so a couple of walkthroughs of that, you're pretty well hip on that. More difficult is go back and study HTML. You got to know how to do HTML if you're going to hand tailor any web pages, but more importantly, cascading style sheets. All right, because cascading style sheets is where you can organize tables, you can control the size of graphics, you can change fonts, all that extra stuff. You can do a lot more with cascading style sheets than you can with just naked HTML. The good news about CSS is there's many sites on the web that will walk you through tutorials and show you all kinds of really cool examples, and they're perfectly free. If you're a dead tree kind of person, you can go to Half Price Books, and there's CSS manuals there for the taking, $5-7 kind of thing. Hyperlegible font, we've already talked about that. You can download it for free. Color Brewer's out there for free. The Web Aim contrast checker's out there for free, and the Markup validation service is out there for free. Okay, once you know about those tools, start using them. Just start using them. Okay, get in the habit of doing them. One thing is you'll find out that your documents, and especially your web presentations, are going to be a lot more attractive. Okay, because you're going to have these nice organizational tools. You're going to put good color in here. Okay. Oh gosh, maybe you should look at my web pages. Look at all the different headings with the different styles and colors and all that kind of good stuff. Okay, how did I do that? Cascading style sheets. Let's say, okay, I didn't go around and color every one of those guys. I said heading level 1 is a certain size and color. Heading level 2 is a certain size of color. I wrote it down once. Boom. When I generate the document, there it is. Okay. Legible fonts. Okay. I can't stress that enough. It's got to be legible. No tiny text. No tiny text. Okay. How many people watch Svengoolie? Anybody watch Svengoolie? Nobody else watches Svengoolie. You guys are squares. Okay. He always says no personal checks. I say no tiny text. Okay. And make sure that when you are emphasizing things, pick good colors, pick good font weights, that kind of stuff. It goes a long ways. Like I said, it makes a document more readable and more visually attractive. Some resources. I talked about Atkinson Hyperlegible. There's an example of how you can configure your web browser. Okay, so you can just go to the settings on your web browser and pick that font. Okay, and so if you have any visual problems, that'll go a long ways towards helping. Here's some of the other references. There's the link for the font. There's your color brewer. There's your validator, and there's your contrast checker. Okay, this presentation, I am going to post that in the ASA chapter archive, the public archive. All right, and I'll be sending a link to that back to the student chapter, so you guys can just jump on that. I'll also be posting it on my Blackboard sites for any and all of my students who are hoping to get some extra credit from this presentation. Wow. I think I'm out of stuff to say, and I think it's time for me to sit down and be quiet.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Professor Anderson. Do we have any questions? I do have a question, but I want to give someone else a chance if they do have any burning questions they might have about the presentation. If not, I can start. My question is, so let's say you do create a report, right, in a job, and someone does raise the issue that they either can't see what you have up there, or something, is the font's too small, or like, what is the best way to respond in a way that is accommodating and not necessarily like you aren't necessarily taking offense to it, like, oh, I put a lot of work into that presentation, or I put a lot of work into that graph that you see, and then now you're telling me the colors are not okay. Like, what's the best way to approach responding to that and actually changing something?
Okay. So the first thing, okay, when you do this, realize that any and every accommodation you make is gonna be some work for you. All right. I mean, there's just no way around that. There's just no way around that. And the first time I had to start doing all these modifications, quite honestly, I was irate. I was just like, damn, I've been doing all this work, okay, and trying to get this stuff right, and now somebody's telling me that this font is the wrong color, okay, and that's just like, what I don't get it. What's the problem? All right. So then I started going out and looking at all these tools like the color checker and all that kind of stuff. And I realized what the problems were. Okay. I realized what the problems were. Okay. And the reason that it initially seems like an imposition to you is because you just had no idea of how profound the problem is. Okay. It just wasn't on your radar. Okay. I mean, you never thought about this in your whole life. Okay. And so it's a big shock the first time you roll into it. So you gotta get the ego out of it. You gotta get the ego out of it. Okay. And there's some people, especially the super geeks that they know their technology and they have a certain aesthetic sense and they don't want to budge. They don't want to budge. Okay. All right. Let me tell you this. If you're not the CEO of your own company, okay, you're going to budge. You're going to budge. You're either going to do the work the way that it has to be done, or they're going to find somebody else to do it for you. Okay. And probably without you. All right. So, just lose the ego immediately. Just lose the ego immediately. Now, having said that, and saying, all right, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to bite the bullet, and I'm going to try to be a good team player. The second thing to do is find out what the specific accessibility barrier is. Okay. Don't try to fix everything. Okay. Because you haven't got time to be perfect. You haven't got time to be perfect. Your boss doesn't have time to pay you to be perfect. Okay. He wants the immediate problem taken care of. All right. And so then you got to address the problem. Is it color? Is it legibility? Is it font size? Okay. Is it organization? Okay. It could be any one of those things or several other things. Okay. Find out what that specific problem is, and then find the fix for that problem. Okay. And then once you've done that, step one of the fix is to apply the fix to the product that caused the problem. Okay. So you got to specifically address the client. All right. And so the client says, I cannot read this SAS output. All right. Because it's too weird. There's not enough contrast. The font's too small, blah, blah, blah. All right. So you go in there and you say, okay, we're publishing a ton of SAS output and they can't read it. And he's got trouble with this report. So what do? You go in and you twiddle the CSS, you change the font, you change the weight, you change the color, whatever, and you tweak it. You may have to go through 3 or 4 iterations before the client says, oh man, that looks great. That's the way I like it. Okay, I can deal with that. All right. And so you give the client the improved product. Okay. Now, what's important is write down what the hell you did. Okay. Don't forget, don't just do it as a one-off. So write down what you did and then retrofit all of your other work processes to apply that fix. Okay. At least ongoing for new product. If you have existing stuff that's permanent on your site or in your archives, come up with a plan for retooling all of that and get that fix applied. Okay. Because once that's done, that's a barrier that's been removed and it won't come back. Okay. It won't come back. Okay. The closest I could equate it to is the famous Y2K problem. Okay. So people wrote all this software and it didn't accommodate a date rollover to the 21st century. Okay. And I found that to be particularly dismal because I had been beaten on the Y2K drum in the 1980s. Okay. So I retired out of government service in 1991 and I'd been talking about Y2K for at least 5 years. Okay. Nobody did anything until like 1998. Okay. Because we're too busy and that's not going to happen for so long and everything. Well, someday always comes. Someday always comes. And so if you can make a fix for an accommodation, and try to do it in an economical way. Okay. Do not go hand correct all your documents. Figure out how to regenerate them with like cascading style sheets or whatever technique works for you. You might have to regenerate graphics with a different color palette, that sort of thing. But figure out how to do that and then institutionalize that. All right. So that's the way to do that. Now, what's going to happen? You're going to do this and man, all of a sudden everybody can read your SAS output. Everybody loves your graphics. Okay. And then somebody comes along like 2 months later and they says, this crap just breaks the screen reader. Okay. Because your visuals are great, but we got a bunch of people that actually have to use text to voice and they can't read a damn thing you did. All right. Okay. Repeat the process, but apply the new fix. But like I said before, don't try to be perfect. We're under kind of a handicap here at UTSA because we have to work sort of laterally rather than vertically. Okay. And by laterally, I mean we have to address all the problems simultaneously when we put up a course website. Okay. But in a corporate setting, you may not have to do that. Okay. So, I would figure out how to break the problem into smaller pieces and then just deal with them one at a time as time and resources allow. Oh, that was a really long answer for a really short question. Okay. But that means it was a good question.
I was going to say thank you for that answer. Do we have any questions from the audience? Feel free to drop it in the chat or if you are comfortable. Love to hear from you.
Oh, I like Stephanie. Haha, he said we were squares. But we're what did he Hugh Lewis in the News said it, right? It's hip to be square. It's hip to be square. Okay.
Let's see. I'll ask, I guess, one last question. So you said that you've on that second, I think was it the second one that you showed where the numbers and the circles, you said you could only see three of those, right? So if you had moments where you had to correct, like to tell people to change something they were presenting to you, and I'm curious about like if you are in a company and you are visually impaired and the person presenting to you is a higher up, like how is that supposed to go in terms of you kind of communicating that you can't really see?
Okay. Well, all right. So that's always a kind of a touchy question. You know, the boss or somebody higher up in the food chain does something or presents something, and to you it's quite obvious that it's lacking, that they just totally missed on something. Okay. And so you're in a kind of a tough spot. Okay, because it needs to get fixed. It needs to get fixed, and you need to make people aware of that, and you need to make people aware of that in a way that is constructive rather than confrontational. Okay, and again, remember that the person making this presentation might be one of those super geeks that has an inflated sense of pride in the way that he does things. Okay, so you certainly do not just jump up in the middle of a presentation and say, God couldn't read that goddamn graph of yours because the colors are shit. All right, that ain't gonna get it. That ain't gonna get it. You don't want to start a fight. You want to get it changed. You want organizational change, and so that means you have to approach this in a way that's constructive and cooperative. Okay, and in fact, you gotta get this guy to buy into what you want him to do. All right. Now you might be able to just do this with a simple question. Okay, and it could be something like, did you choose that color palette because it somehow corresponds to product, or was it somewhat arbitrary? Because I can see that there might be problems with people who have poor color vision. Okay, and so it might just be that a politely worded question will prompt action. All right, and if the follow-up is, wow, I never thought of that, but I'm not quite sure how to go about it, then since you shot off your big mouth, it's kind of incumbent on you to say, I have access to some resources that I can probably help you out on that if you're interested. Okay, so you gotta kind of be sneaky on this. Now, sometimes one or two polite questions won't get you there. They just won't get you there, because there's some people, how can I say this? They can't take a hint. They can't take a frickin' hint. All right. And again, this is not the time to jump up and say, what the hell's wrong with you? Can't you take a hint? All right. Even though you'd like to. All right. So don't do that. Don't do that. Instead, what you want to do is maybe go talk to this person informally, privately, and say, gosh, I hope I didn't put you on the spot with that question, but you just socked me in the eye with that thing, because I really wanted to understand your presentation, and the colors just messed me up. And if necessary, show them the goddamn color blots and say, okay, look at these. There's 6 circles. How many numbers can you see? And if he says 6, then you say, geez, I'm so envious because I can only see 3 of them. I can only see 3 of them. And that's what's going on with color vision. All right. And color vision is relatively common. Something like 8% of all men have deficient color vision. So this is a non-debilitating visual handicap that's relatively common and it's easy to explain. All right. And so it's a good example. It's a good example. You know, when we talk about people who are impaired, we're always thinking about the guy that's in a wheelchair that has trouble reading sentences, or you know, maybe has a palsy, or really bad vision or something like that. But those are the extreme cases. Those are the extreme cases. There's millions of people who have much smaller impairments that cause communication barriers. All right, and we're really not as aware of it as we could be. So we're not as accommodating as we could be. And that's why I say this is still a work in progress. I don't think we're going to get done in any of our lifetimes. Okay, because there's just stuff that if you're on the wrong side of it, it's really obvious that it's a problem. But if you're on the abled side of it, it never even occurs to you. It's just out there. Okay. And it's kind of funny because this is the argument that people make when they talk about, they use terms like systematic racism. Okay. And the idea there is that things, for certain groups of people, things look different if you're in the group than when you're out of the group. Okay. And that's especially for the outsiders, it's hard to understand. Okay. And then the problem for the insiders is sometimes it's hard to explain. Okay. And so that's a you know, an ongoing communications barrier. I think that once we recognize that there are these kinds of barriers, and that once we explain what the barrier is, then we can make accommodation. Okay. The big thing about accommodation is accommodation needs to make a difference. It needs to make a difference. It needs to put the disadvantaged parties in a position where they can deal with others on an equal basis. Okay. So we got to level the playing field. And if all it takes is changing the colors of some lines on a graph, okay, that's not a very big price to pay. Okay. That's really important. Okay. You've gone a long ways. I had a management style back in my misspent youth with the Air Force, and most people think about management in terms of big strategies and delegations of authority and organizational charts and workflow and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I'm here to tell you that stuff's easy. All right. Day-to-day management of individuals is hard. Okay. Because you have obviously variations in talent, in personality, in ambition, in drive, capability, all kinds of things. Every person is an individual, but a really simple management technique that I found to be very effective, I like to call taking the rock out of your shoe. Okay. We've all had the experience of being out walking and a pebble or a burr or seed or piece of stick or something gets inside your shoe, and you're walking along, and all of a sudden you notice, damn, my foot is sore. There's something biting on me. Okay. And you got to stop and take your shoe off and shake it out and get that damn thing out of there. Okay. Oh, that feels a lot better. Okay. In almost any organization, people are doing work and they've got some kind of rock in their shoe. There's something that's irritating them, that's interfering with their work. It's causing them to do go-arounds or slow them down, or it's some kind of an impediment. And a good manager pays attention and finds out about the rocks in the shoe. Now, the big thing, the big reason that you use this management technique is that most of those rocks are cheap or easy to remove. Okay. And so you can do a little change in procedure. You can change up some equipment. You might change around work groups or supervisory arrangements. Okay. Lots of times it's simply changing a policy. All right. And so you find those cheap things. Military, it's easy to find those cheap things because military people have a tradition of griping. Okay. Military people just love to complain. All right. And I mean, they'll complain about almost anything. All right. Because it's, to them, that's a bonding experience, and it's actually a way to vent. Okay. So if you're feeling frustrated, you gripe about stuff. But if you listen carefully to the gripes, some of the gripes are about rocks. Okay. And so you find out what the rocks are, and then, you know, when nobody's looking, you take the rocks away. All right. And then they come back to work, and that impediment's not there anymore. And it's like, whoa, what happened? This is really great. I can get this work done twice as fast, you know, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing a lot more. So a lot of this business with accessibility barriers is finding rocks, and some of the rocks are easy to fix. A good example, I was talking about that Ally tool that we have for the Blackboard sites. So one of the things that the Ally tool makes very easy to fix is if you forgot to put a title on a graphic so that the screen reader will have a title, it'll point that out to you, and it does a little pop-up screen, and you just type the title in and hit OK, and you're done. All right. And so the technologies are improving, and it's making it easier and easier to lower or remove these barriers. And it's incumbent on all of us to you know, at least be aware of those things, because one of these days it's going to be your turn to be getting rid of some of the rocks. All right. And you don't want to tell your boss, oh, I never heard of this stuff, I don't know how to do it, woe is me. You're going to have to go find some other person. All right. For the simple reason that if you tell him to go find another person, he might just do that. Okay. And if he finds that other person, well, what's going to happen to you?
Yes.
What else? Who else has got a question? We still, oh no, we're running out of time. Hey, I think I've managed to bloviate long enough that we've used up all the time, and now we have to get off the air so that we can go watch I don't know, America's Got Talent or one of those Marvel things or something.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Anderson. It was a great presentation. I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and I will